the golden sun rose slowly over New Busan Colony, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors. Minho Park knelt in his garden, carefully watering the strange blue flowers that grew next to Earth's red roses. His hands were gentle, patient. These were not the hands of a warrior, though his grandfather's hands had once guided massive warships through the darkness between stars. Minho smiled as he watched a small, alien butterfly land on one of his roses. The creature had 6 wings that sparkled like tiny mirrors. 3 generations ago, his grandfather would have seen such a being as either enemy or ally. Now, Minho saw it simply as beautiful. The colony spread out below him, like a peaceful dream. Families walked through parks where children laughed and played games from a dozen different worlds. Artists painted pictures of the twin moons. Scientists grew new kinds of food in the biodomes that looked like giant soap. Bubbles scattered across the valley. The old buildings told stories of different times. The military academy, where soldiers once learned to fight, now taught students about alien plants and animals. The parade ground where troops had marched in formation was now a quiet place where people sat and thought about life's deeper meanings. Commander. Gina Lee walked the same path she had walked every morning for 5 years. Her uniform was bright blue with silver buttons, pretty to look at but carrying no weapons. She wore it because it was tradition, not because anyone expected trouble. The Terran Defense Force was more like a rescue team now. Their few ships spent most of their time helping sick colonists or bringing supplies to distant worlds. Gina stopped at the observation post and looked up at the stars. Space seemed so peaceful now. Trade ships moved slowly between worlds like lazy fish in a calm ocean. No one hurried. No one feared attack. The galaxy had found a rhythm of peace that seemed like it would last forever. But something felt different. Today, a cold feeling touched Gina's heart, though she could not say why. The stars looked the same. The morning routine continued as always. Children still laughed in the parks below. Then she saw them. 3 ships hung at the edge of the solar system like black knives against the stars. They were not human ships. The design was wrong, too sharp, too angry. These vessels looked like they were built for hunting. Gina tried to contact them. Unknown ships. This is New Busan Colony. Please identify yourselves. Her voice stayed. .com, but her heart began to beat faster. No answer came back. The ships just watched and waited. For hours, the alien vessels studied the colony. They scanned everything, the defensive systems, the population centers, the industrial areas. They recorded it all with the cold patience of predators studying prey. Governor Hyein Kim was 78 years old. He had lived through the end of the last war and the beginning of this long peace. His office walls were covered with pictures of children, festivals, and graduation ceremonies. No battle flags, no weapons, no maps marked with enemy positions. When Gina brought him the news of the mysterious ships, his old hands began to shake, not from fear, but from memory. He had seen ships like these before, in his nightmares about the old days. Call everyone together, he told Gina quietly. The whole colony needs to know. The meeting hall filled quickly. Farmers left their fields. Artists put down their brushes. Teachers brought their students. They came because they trusted their governor, but also because something in the air felt wrong. Hyein Kim stood before his people, looking at faces that had never known war. Children who had never seen a weapon fired in anger. Parents who thought the word enemy was something from old history books. They see us as weak, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps we have grown too comfortable in our peace. The alien ships left as suddenly as they had come. But within days, similar reports arrived from other colonies. The same black ships, the same silent watching, the same cold scanning of human worlds. Then the silence began. First, the mining station at Kepler went quiet. Then the research post at Vega stopped sending messages. One by one, like candles being blown out. Human voices disappeared from space. The hegemony was coming. They moved through human space like wolves through a flock of sleeping sheep. They expected no fight. Why would they? Humans had spent 30 years turning swords into garden tools and warships into hospital ships. But deep in the old museums, in the locked vaults beneath Earth's cities, other things waited. Weapons that had been put away, not destroyed. Knowledge that had been stored, not forgotten. The tools and wisdom of warriors who had once made the galaxy tremble. The sleeping giant was about to wake up, and when it did, the hegemony would learn that there is a difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight. The morning sun still rose over New Busan Colony. Minho still tended his garden, but now, as he watered his flowers, he remembered stories his grandfather had told him about the old days. Stories he had thought were just tales to entertain children. Soon, those stories might become real again. Dr. Sina Yoon floated through the research station like a dancer in space. Her laboratory orbited the beautiful blue planet Kepler-442b, where strange aurora lights painted the sky in colors that had no names. For 15 years, she had worked here, trying to solve one of science's greatest puzzles: how to make two particles talk to each other across the entire galaxy in the same instant. The quantum lab was her favorite place in the universe. Tiny particles of light danced in glass chambers, spinning and glowing like captured stars. When these particles were connected in just the right way, touching one would make its partner react immediately, even if they were separated by millions of miles. "Mom, why do they glow like that?" 12-year-old Yuna asked, pressing her nose against the observation window. She visited the station every day after finishing her lessons, always full of questions that made the grown-up scientists stop and think. Sina smiled and knelt beside her daughter. "They remember each other," she said simply. "No matter how far apart they go, they never forget their connection." Yuna's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like us. Even when you're working late, I can feel that you're thinking about me." "Exactly like that," Sina whispered, pulling her daughter close. The research was almost complete. Soon, diplomats on Earth could speak with ambassadors on distant worlds as if they were in the same room. Wars might end before they started. Misunderstandings could be cleared up in moments instead of months. The galaxy would become smaller, friendlier, more connected. But the hegemony had different plans. Their ships appeared without warning around. Kepler 442. Black vessels that looked like they were made from nightmares, bristling with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They moved in perfect formation, like a pack of metal wolves. Sina was in the quantum lab when the first alarms began to sound. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Through the thick windows, she could see the alien ships positioning themselves around the station like hunters surrounding wounded prey. "All stations. This is Captain Morrison," came the voice over the intercom. "Unknown vessels are demanding our immediate surrender. They claim this system now belongs to something called the hegemony." Senna's hands flew over her control panels, trying to send a message to Earth. But the alien ships had already cut off all communications. The station was alone, defenseless, surrounded by enemies who gave no warning and asked for no negotiations. The first weapons blast shook the entire station, but instead of trying to destroy it quickly, the aliens aimed at specific targets: life support systems, air recycling plants, power generators. They wanted the people inside to die slowly, to suffer, to understand their helplessness. Children screamed in the education center where Yuna was taking her afternoon classes. Sina ran through corridors that were already filling with smoke and sparks. Emergency barriers slammed shut behind her, sealing off damaged sections, but also trapping people inside. She found Yuna and 15 other children huddled in the corner of their classroom. Their teacher, Mr. Kim, was trying to calm them down, but his own face was white with fear. The station shuddered again as another blast tore through the outer hall. "Mom," Yuna cried, running into Sina's arms. "It's going to be okay," Sina lied, holding her daughter tight. But she knew it wasn't true. The station was dying around them. The aliens outside showed no mercy, no interest in saving innocent lives. Sina activated the emergency broadcast system with shaking fingers. If they were going to die, the rest of humanity needed to see what was happening. They needed to know that the peaceful galaxy they believed in was ending. The camera showed everything. The children crying in fear, the smoke filling the room, the station's hull cracking like an eggshell as alien weapons tore it apart. And in the center of it all, Senna shielding the children with her own body, her daughter pressed against her heart. "This is Dr. Senna Yoon at Kepler Research Station," she said into the camera, her voice steady, despite everything. "We are under attack by unknown aliens who call themselves the Hegemony. They gave no warning. They offered no terms. They simply came to kill us." Another explosion shook the station. The quantum lab, seen as life work, erupted in a cascade of brilliant light. The connected particles that she had studied for so many years were torn apart, their bond finally broken. The explosion painted the dying station in beautiful colors that looked like a rainbow made of stars. "Remember us?" Sina whispered as the walls began to collapse. "Remember that we tried to build something beautiful." The transmission cut off as the station broke apart, but the signal had already traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying its terrible message to every human world in the galaxy. On Earth, in the Great Council chambers, where leaders debated farming policies and art funding, Doyeon Choi watched the recording again and again. Each time, he saw the same thing: a mother dying to protect children, killed by enemies who saw kindness as weakness. Around the table, politicians who had never thought about war suddenly faced a choice their grandparents had hoped they would never have to make. The vote was quick and unanimous. Deep beneath the museums, in vaults that had been sealed for 30 years, ancient weapons waited in the darkness. The sleeping giant was about to open its eyes. Admiral Kwon Seo walked slowly through the Terran Naval Museum, his footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. For 15 years, he had been the keeper of old memories, showing visitors the weapons and ships from humanity's violent past. Children would stare wide-eyed at the displays, while their parents explained that those dark days were over forever. But now everything had changed. The museum's basement doors, sealed for 3 decades, stood open again. Ancient machines hummed back to life as engineers removed dust covers from equipment that had been sleeping in the darkness. Kwon climbed aboard the dreadnought Soul's Pride, a massive warship that had been turned into a museum exhibit. The command center still worked perfectly, its screens lighting up as he touched the controls. His hands seemed to remember exactly where everything was, though he had never operated these systems in real combat. On his desk lay his grandfather's war journal, pages yellow with age. The old man had written about tactics and strategies, about reading enemy movements and striking at their weakest points. What had once seemed like interesting history now became a manual for survival. All across human space, the same awakening was happening. Shipyards that had spent decades building peaceful exploration ships suddenly changed their purpose. The same workers who had installed comfortable living quarters and scientific laboratories now fitted weapons and armor plating. Dr. Jisoo Han had always been proud of her terraforming machines. These wonderful devices could take a dead planet and give it breathable air, turning rocks and dust into gardens where families could live. But now, as she stared at the blueprints spread across her table, she saw something else entirely. "If we reverse the process," she told her team, her voice quiet and troubled, "we could strip the air from an enemy world in hours instead of giving it life." Her assistants looked uncomfortable. They had become scientists to help people, not hurt them. But the images from Kepler Station played in their minds, children dying while their mothers tried to protect them. "We don't have to use them," Dr. Han said finally. But they need to know that we could. Across the galaxy, Minji Quan sat in a room full of star maps and tactical displays. For 20 years, she had been a peace negotiator, helping different species solve their problems without fighting. She knew how to read faces, how to understand what people really wanted, how to find solutions that made everyone feel like they had one. Now, she used those same skills for war. She studied reports about hegemony movements, predicting where they would strike next and how they would react when humanity fought back. Her diplomatic training had taught her to think like her opponents, and that knowledge was more valuable than any weapon. The hegemony's first real battle with awakened humanity happened at Vega, a star system on the edge of human space. There, commanders expected an easy victory. Intelligence reports said the humans had only a few old ships, probably converted cargo vessels with improvised weapons. They were completely wrong. Captain Sun Ho Lim stood on the bridge of his ship New Horizon, watching enemy vessels approach on his screens. His crew had never fought a space battle before, but somehow they all knew exactly what to do. The weapons officer loaded the right ammunition without being told. The navigation officer plotted escape routes before being asked. The communications officer was already listening for enemy signals. "Take us into quantum phase," Sun Ho ordered. Calmly, the New Horizon disappeared from normal space, becoming a ghost that could strike from any direction. Around it, a dozen other human ships did the same thing. Vanishing like shadows, the hegemony fleet found itself fighting enemies that appeared and disappeared without warning. Human ships would phase into reality long enough to fire their weapons, then vanish again before return fire could reach them. It was like fighting smoke and mirrors, but the most terrifying thing was how perfectly the human ships worked together. They moved like they were controlled by a single mind, each captain knowing exactly where his comrades would be and what they would do next. The hegemony had expected chaos and panic. Instead, they faced coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Within 3 hours, half the hegemony fleet was destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The survivors fled toward their home territory, sending desperate messages about demons and ghosts that could not be killed. In the hegemony command center, generals stared at battle reports that made no sense. How had a peaceful species suddenly become so deadly? Where had these advanced ships come from? Most importantly, how had humans learned to fight like this? The answer was both simple and terrifying. Humanity had never forgotten how to wage war. They had simply chosen not to. For 30 years, they had focused their incredible talents on art, science, and peace. But those same minds that could terraform planets and negotiate complex treaties could also design perfect weapons and flawless strategies. The sleeping giant had not just awakened. During its long sleep, it had grown stronger, smarter, more dangerous than ever before. And now it was very, very angry, deep beneath the city of Seoul. In a room that had been built for emergencies no one hoped would ever come, General Taeyeon-oh stood before the largest war map in human space. The walls around him glowed with thousands of points of light, red for enemy positions, blue for human fleets, and yellow for civilian populations that needed protection. For 6 months, Taeyeon had been planning this moment. Not 6 months since the war began, but 6 months since he had been a retired history teacher, telling students about the old battles their great-grandparents had fought. Now those lessons had become real again, and he was the one making decisions that would affect billions of lives. The plan was beautiful in its terrible simplicity. Instead of attacking the hegemony's strongest points, human fleets would strike at 43 different targets at exactly the same moment. Supply stations that fed their armies, communication towers that carried their orders, training centers where their officers learned to fight. "All fleets report ready," said his aide, Commander Jae-jin Song. She had been a music teacher before. The war started. Now she coordinated the movements of 100 warships with the same precision. She had once used to direct a school orchestra. Taeyeon looked at the clock. In 30 seconds, everything would change. The hegemony would learn what happened when you woke something that had chosen to sleep. Execute, he said quietly. Across the galaxy, human ships appeared from quantum phase like deadly flowers blooming in the darkness of space. But they did not come as destroyers. Each fleet carried the same message, broadcast on every frequency the hegemony used. Attention hegemony forces. You have 1 hour to evacuate all civilian personnel from military installations. Surrender your weapons and you will not be harmed. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to end a war. Commander Yoonji Park led the most important attack, striking directly at the hegemony's home world. Her fleet of 12 ships emerged from quantum phase directly above their capital city, a metropolis of crystal towers that housed 50 million beings. The hegemony's planetary defenses activated immediately, but Youngji's ships ignored them completely. Instead, they targeted only military buildings with surgical precision. A barracks here, a command center there, an ammunition depot on the outskirts of the city. Each strike was perfectly placed to avoid civilian casualties. The message was clear and terrifying. Humanity could have destroyed the entire planet in the first minute of the attack. Instead, they chose to be merciful. That mercy was more frightening than any weapon. In his office in the philosophy department of New Seoul University, Professor Ji-hoon Nam had spent his life studying how different cultures thought about war and peace. Now, he sat at a simple desk, writing the terms that would end the greatest conflict in galactic history. The surrender document was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It allowed hegemony leaders to claim they were making a strategic withdrawal rather than admitting defeat. It promised fair treatment for prisoners and protection for civilian populations. Most importantly, it made clear that continued resistance would result in the complete destruction of their civilization. We offer you this choice not from weakness, but from strength, Ji-hoon wrote. We could end your species today. We choose not to. Do not make us reconsider this choice. On the hegemony homeworld, the Council of War met in their underground bunker as human ships hung in the sky above them like metal angels of death. The council chamber, carved from solid rock and designed to survive planet-killing weapons, felt small and vulnerable under the gaze of humanity's fleet. Counselor Zackstar, the leader who had convinced his people that humans were weak and ripe for conquest, stared at tactical displays that showed the true situation. Human fleets surrounded 43 hegemony worlds simultaneously. Their supply lines were cut, their communications were compromised, their military academies were occupied, but the most disturbing reports came from his intelligence officers. Humanity had achieved this victory without destroying a single civilian target. They had captured supply depots intact, preserved communication, equipment for their own use, and even provided medical aid to wounded hegemony soldiers. They fight like gods, whispered General Vexton, his voice shaking. They strike everywhere at once, yet harm no innocents. How do we fight an enemy that shows us mercy while defeating us completely? The psychological impact was devastating. The hegemony had built their entire culture around the belief that strength meant the willingness to destroy everything in your path. Now they faced an enemy that was stronger than them precisely because it refused to do that. One by one the reports came in. The supply depot at Rigel had surrendered without firing a shot. The communication relay at Vega had been captured intact. The military academy at Centauri had lowered its shields and opened its doors. Across hegemony space, commanders faced the same impossible choice: fight against overwhelming odds and watch their people die for nothing, or surrender to an enemy that promised to treat them fairly. The war ended not with explosions and death, but with understanding, as each hegemony world powered down its weapons and opened communications with human forces. A new truth spread through the galaxy. Humanity had not returned to wage war. They had returned to end war itself. The sleeping giant had awakened, looked at the violence around it, and decided to put a stop to it once and for all. The galaxy would never be the same. President Sang-hoon, you walked to the center of the great assembly hall, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Around him, creatures from across the galaxy filled thousands of seats, beings with scales, fur, metal skin, and forms that defied easy description. 5 years ago, many of these species had been enemies. Now they sat together as partners in the Galactic Accord. The hall itself was a wonder of cooperative engineering. Crystal pillars grown by the Vorthok supported a dome designed by human architects, while Netherian gas breathers had provided the atmospheric systems that allowed so many different species to breathe the same air. 5 years ago, Sang-hoon began, his voice carried by translators to every corner of the chamber. We all learned something important. We learned that peace is not the absence of strength, it is strength used wisely. In the audience, former hegemony leaders nodded in agreement. Their worlds had not been conquered and enslaved as they had feared. Instead, they had been welcomed into a new order where their skills and knowledge were valued. Trade routes that had once carried weapons now carried art, food, and medicine between former enemies. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Suyang Kim stood on the bridge of the medical ship Harmony, watching her crew prepare for another rescue mission. The distress call had come from the mining colonies in the Rigel sector, where a strange plague was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. How long until we reached them? She asked her navigation officer. 6 hours at maximum speed, came the reply. 6 hours to save thousands of lives. The same quantum technology that had once allowed human warships to appear anywhere in the galaxy. Now let medical teams reach disaster zones before it was too late. Ships that had been designed to carry weapons now carried medicine, food, and hope. When the Harmony arrived at Rigel, the mining colonies were in chaos. The plague attacked the nervous systems of silicon-based life forms, leaving the rock-like miners unable to think clearly or control their movements. Without treatment, they would all be dead within days. But human scientists had been studying alien biology for decades. The same research that had once been used to create biological weapons now provided cures. Within hours, Suyang's medical team had synthesized a treatment that stopped the plague in its tracks. "Thank you," whispered the colony leader, a being whose rocky skin glowed with relief. "We thought we were all going to die." "That's what the Accord is for," Suyang replied gently. "We protect each other." Meanwhile, in the diplomatic quarter of New Geneva Station, young Min Lee sat across a table from 2 very different aliens, trying to solve a very old problem. The Vorthok were crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns, while the Netherians were gas creatures who spoke in chemical sense. They had been arguing about trade routes for 6 months. "Your shipping containers leak radiation that damages our crystal structures," pulsed the Vorthok representative, her body flashing angry reds and oranges. "Your crystal ships block our gas flows and make our cargo spoil," replied the Netherian, releasing a bitter scent that made the air filters work overtime. Young Min had learned about logistics during the war, when human fleets needed to coordinate supply lines across dozens of star systems. Now he used that same knowledge to help former enemies work together. "What if we create hybrid stations?" he suggested. "Crystal containers protected by Netherian gas fields. Your product stays safe, and the gas flows freely around them." Both aliens paused to consider this. The Vortex colors shifted to thoughtful blues and greens. The Netherian released a sweeter scent that meant interest. Within an hour, they had worked out the details. A trade dispute that had lasted months was solved with a solution that made both sides stronger. But the galaxy had also learned that humanity's protection came with consequences for those who chose violence. When pirates from the Outer Rim began attacking cargo ships, thinking the new peace had made everyone soft, they discovered their mistake quickly. The pirate fleet struck at a convoy carrying medical supplies to a refugee camp. Their ships were fast and their weapons were deadly, but they made one crucial error. They forgot that human patrol fleets were always watching. 18 hours after the first attack, the pirates found themselves surrounded by ships that appeared from quantum phase without warning. But instead of destroying the pirate vessels, the human fleet simply disabled them, capturing the crews alive and unharmed. "Why didn't you just kill us?" asked the pirate captain as he was taken into custody. "Because we're not like you," replied the human commander. "We fight only when we have to, and we kill only when there's no other choice." In a small garden on Earth, Elder Hunwoo Shin knelt beside a memorial stone carved with two names, Dr. Sena Yoon and her daughter Yuna. The old man was one of the last people alive who remembered the wars before the peace, and his words carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "We learned something our ancestors never understood," he said to the gathered crowd. "True strength is not the ability to destroy everything in your path. True strength is knowing when to use that ability and when to hold back." The sleeping giant had awakened, but it had not become a monster. Instead, humanity had grown into something new, guardians who watched over the galaxy with gentle strength, ready to act when needed, but wise enough to choose peace whenever possible. They had not just woken up from their long sleep. They had grown up.